you on September 11th. You know, I was home. And the only reason I wasn't where I was every morning, subsequent to the 26th.
Look at those beady little eyes looking to the side.
Definitely lying.
He's definitely telling the truth. I was going to say, but I guess we just have different ways of thinking or something like that.
Different point of view here.
Yeah.
July. My mornings were.
Oh, yeah. For you guys, this is Lucky Larry Silverstein. He had the lease on the World Trade Center. September. The one the big planes flew into. So Lucky Larry. Obviously, he survived.
8 o'clock breakfast meeting. Windows the top of it, and then going down to visit my tenants, my new tenants. At the trade center, getting to know them, understanding their problems and so forth, ascertaining how I can service their needs better. Which is first one of the first things you do when you acquire a property. You begin to meet your tenants and start talking with them. And so my mornings were spent at the trade center, and then by noon I was back uptown. And so that particular morning, because I have light-colored hair and fair skin, and I'm an annuity to the dermatologist, my wife, God bless her, had made an appointment for me at the doctor.
God bless her.
To go to the doctor. I said, sweetheart.
Save this poor guy's life. Yeah, he went to the dermatologist.
What are the chances that he had a dermatologist appointment on the same day and time?
What are the chances?
I got so much new downtown.
I wonder how long his appointment was.
And
long enough.
She said, "You're not gonna cancel."
Long enough.
Me to the dermatologist. You know, having been married now to the same woman for 46 years, you get this sense of determination on occasion. Their voices. And I said, okay, yes, dear, I'll go. And then just minutes later, she telephoned on television set. This horrendous circumstance. The first plane hitting, then the second plane hitting. Of course, with the second hit, it became obvious that this was terrorism. And so, next thing you know, we got the designs of a building. And the first design meeting was in April of 2000. And construction began shortly thereafter in 2002. But we ran into a problem. We couldn't collect the insurance because the insurance companies didn't want to pay.
What? Terrible people.
Insurance companies defending.
They're trying to get over on Larry.
I know. How dare you?
They didn't know what kind of lucky guy they're dealing with.
And so they took me to court. And I had to beat them in court, the lower court. And then had to take an appeal and win in the upper court. So they owed me $4.5 billion.
Wow.
A new governor was just elected. Elliot Spitzer, an old friend who I knew well. I said, Elliot, if you don't help me, I'll never collect from the insurance companies. And guess what? He listened and he said, you know what? You're entitled. I'm going to get you money in 6 months. He got me the $4.5 billion. Insurance companies didn't like me, but at least I got the money.
So
You got that money.
real quick.
Yeah.
This guy takes out an insurance policy on the World Trade Centers. How soon before the 9/11 attacks happened?
2 months. Actually, probably about 6 weeks.
Wow. So, and he never had any insurance policy on these towers of this type prior to that.
No, so it looks like he got the lease just a few months before, or a few years rather. And he gets the insurance policy about 6 weeks before the event. And he basically any sort of incident is covered up to $3.5 billion. And he says, well, that's 2 planes. That's 2 incidents. So
Makes sense to me.
you owe me for 2 incidents. You owe me $7 billion. And he was a nice guy. He settled for 4.5. So
What a sweetheart. Just 4.5 bill?
just 4.5 bills.
Wow. So this guy literally never thought to take out an insurance policy prior to just 2 months before this happened. And then he happened to also not be in the building, which he normally is every single morning on this one specific morning. Wow, that's fantastic.
What an ironic coincidence.
Oh, even better. His his 2 kids work there too, and they happen to be late to work that day. So what are the chances, right?
He's not at work like he normally is, having his breakfast. His kids aren't at work like they normally are, showing up for their shift. And
they were all in a bunker, bro. They were all in a bunker.
He just texts them before, like the day before. Hey guys, just don't go into work tomorrow, or at least be late. Some shit's about to go down, so we got to make sure we're safe. Okay, everyone else in there, they could, we can't make this a well-known thing. So you guys just be a little late, fashionably late, an hour, 2 hours, nothing crazy. You won't have to go into work anyway.
Let's just say the situation was about to blow up. Okay.
They were underneath the Denver airport.
Right. They
underneath the Denver airport.
They were just done. They were down there chilling.
They're underneath there in the Masonic temple or something like that. Pardon me.
Yeah.
Jeez. Lucky Larry Silverstein, man.
That right there is a man whose name goes down in history as the smartest man and the safest man, and probably now one of the richest men.
Well, definitely not an inside job, 100%. Oh, you should
not.
hear the videos of when he says he wants to, when we're gonna pull the building, when they're gonna demo building 7.
Really?
Let me see. I'm gonna see if I can find it. You guys keep talking.
Okay.
So wait, they were gonna demo the building, and what he did? No, we can't do it. I'll take care of that. Don't worry about it. I'll take care of that. Yeah. We won't have to worry about it. Because in the videos of that happening, it looks like it was a demo anyway.
Yeah. Come on.
So have you ever seen the Twin Towers falling, Zach?
Yeah. Yeah.
Floor by floor by floor by floor.
Each puff of cloud is like a layer. Boom, layer, boom, layer, boom. Like that's literally, you look up how buildings get demolitioned, and it's like the same exact thing. That's literally it. You'd think a plane hitting the top of the building, it might, topple over a little bit. Yeah.
Nah.
Yeah, or the top would be messed up. You know what I mean?
Boy,
nothing.
Like a gouge out.
Check this out. Ready?
We've had such terrible loss of life. Maybe the smartest thing to do is pull it.
He's talking about building 7.
To pull, then we watch the building collapse.
So who set the charges?
Bruh.
Literally, where did the planes go though? After, like, where did the planes end up landing? Does anybody know?
Didn't they melt?
They said the planes were destroyed, but somehow they recovered some passports. They recovered the passports of the people that crashed the buildings.
Wait, so the building and the plane are completely destroyed, but the passports made it?
Well, haven't you ever held a passport? It's made out of like laminate,
Leather.
which is pretty tough. Yeah, leather and laminate. That's pretty tough stuff.
I heard those are flame retardant.
Jet fuel can melt steel beams, but it can't melt the passport. That much is scientific knowledge. That is consensus in the scientific community.
I mean, it makes sense though.
It's basic physics, bro.
You can't lose the passport. That's the most important part of cleaning up after, a plane crashing. If you lose a passport, what else do you have? We saw it happen. There's no way it was an inside job, right? So we need the passports to let everyone's family know who died.
Yeah, and then you watch the newscasts or like the because you can watch recordings of the videos like we were talking about in the last podcast. You can watch the recordings of the news that day, complete with commercial breaks and everything. And
get your ads
2
in.
hours and well, you get the ads. Yeah, but like 2 hours in, they're like, all right, well, we didn't prevent it, but we know it was Muhammad Atta and the 19 or the 18 other hijackers. So we knew it was Osama bin Laden. Sorry we didn't do anything earlier, but
We had to make sure it was real.
yeah, the Clinton administration actually
They
had
had to
those
make it
guys on their
seem like it was
radar,
real.
right? Yeah, they had all
Really?
those guys on their radar, and they didn't pick them up because they said it was like racial profiling or something like that.
Oh wow.
And then we
I don't
ended up
know.
going to war with them for like 20 years.
Well, no,
Yeah.
not even that country, because most of the hijackers were from Saudi Arabia and Pakistan.
Oh, really?
And yeah, I don't no boots on the ground in Saudi Arabia.
Ah.
Yeah.
Well, there is, they are a little more compliant.
They're the
Well,
good
there's
guys.
also
Yeah.
one of the richest families in the world that lives there too.
100%.
That's true.
Oh, the House of Saud.
Yeah, I doubt they'd allow that to come to their country. They're like, no, chill. Too much oil. One missile hits our oil, we're done.
Right. You're getting rid of all that gasoline you guys need over in America. You don't want to do this.
Well, actually, that we should get into that first. In terms of what we talk about.
Let's do that. Let's do that.
Yeah. We should let's get into the map first. Yeah, when you do your thing, like.
Absolutely. Well, before we start this up, welcome to Checked In Podcast, everybody. This is Michael, Zach, and Justin here. This episode is sponsored by Popple, your digital business card. Professionals put Popple on their phones and keys to instantly share contact info with everyone they meet. The best part, the other person doesn't need a Popple or an app to receive your information. Buy yours now at www.popple.co. That's www.popl.co. We got special guest on today, Justin Luzius from Veto War.wordpress.com. And he's about to help us dive deep into some stuff that's not really being talked about. And I think we could bring some light to the situation, if you will.
Oh yeah, we're gonna. What's up, Zach?
No, I said loose.
Yeah, so hey, I'm Justin. I'm from Vets Veto War at WordPress.com. Vets Veto War. I run a blog there. So far, I'm the only writer. So if you want to write, let me know. If you're a veteran, that's who we're looking for. And we do anti-interventionist writing. So interventionism, of course, being the policy of the United States for the past 200 something odd years, intervening in different countries with our military. And my big focus has been the war on terror. But today we're going to dive deep, get into World War One. We're even going to go back 6,000 years, talk about Abraham and the Promised Land.
Ooh.
But yeah, no, for sure. So we're talking about Zionism, Zion, and no, we're not talking about Bob Marley. Zion. Hey, but yeah, if you're going to talk about war, if you're going to talk about U.S. foreign policy, you really can't do it. You can't talk about geopolitics without talking about Zionism. So, Zach, they ever talk? You go to church, yeah?
Yeah, I'm a Christian. Yeah,
They ever talk about Israel at all, or
all the time.
what do they say?
Israel is the Holy Lands, the Promised Lands, where Jesus was born. It's where pretty much our whole religious, all the events in the Bible pretty much take place there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Do they mention like the modern era Israel at all, or?
Nah, pretty much stops a little bit after Jesus dies. So like it's like, after Jesus dies, then it's letters from his apostles that finish the Bible and stuff like that. Yeah.
Well, that's good. I usually you're non-denominational.
Yeah.
If you go into the South, especially the South, we're in New York. Am I allowed to say that?
Yeah. So,
I give away
no turning back now.
No turning back now. Yeah, it's been said. But if you go into like an evangelical church, man, they talk about Israel almost as much as they talk about Jesus. They're like, we must stand with Israel. Blah 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 blah.
Oh,
And I'm
yeah.
like,
That's an important part. You can't miss that.
Yeah.
well, I don't know
It's a
how you
sacred
mix.
land. It's a
Yeah.
sacred land.
I get that, but like, I don't understand how you can conflate that with like patriotism. Where you're like, well, I want to be a patriot. I want to do such and such an action. Well, is it good for Israel? But it's like, well, is it good for America? How about that? I mean,
We're
I
we're
mean-
secondary
I
to
mean-
that.
I mean, outside of the religious thing, I mean, are we like allies with them? Like, are they like on America's good side?
they're kind of like that friend that's always like, hey man, I'm your good friend, but like, can I borrow $20? And you're like, you just borrowed $20 from me last week. Yeah, but if I get this $20, then I can get a tank of gas to get to work, so I can make more money, so I can pay you back.
Mm.
Yeah,
So-
that's a good friend.
Yeah, that's a good friend. Except they also did that the week before. And
Every week they gotta
kicking
get
the can
gas
down the road. Yeah,
How
exactly.
many weeks are we in with this?
Right. Listen, are you not my friend? Are you not my friend? We must stand with Israel. But hey, yeah, let's pull up this map real fast here. So looking at this map of where is it? There we go, right? So here is Israel right here. Can you see my mouse?
Oh, I can
Yeah.
see your mouse. Yeah.
Okay, so we got Israel like right here. Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Uh-huh. Yeah. So what it actually looks like, what we're talking about is Zionism. So Zionism to a lot of people just means kind of standing with Israel. Or supporting Israel's right to exist as a Jewish nation.
Right.
On paper, I mean, or in general, that sounds all right. Okay, sure.
It doesn't sound bad.
Right. People should be able to exist. I don't see a problem with that,
I
right?
think that's fair to say.
Yeah. But here is this in red. It's kind of hard to see. Can you guys see it well enough?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So here are the borders right now.
Uh-huh.
Kind of an odd shape, when you say.
I'd say so.
Yeah. So you've got the West Bank and Gaza right here. And these are the borders that are promised to Abraham, right? From the Nile to the Euphrates. So right here on this side, right here is what's, come on. I can't catch a break. Right. So right here is the Euphrates, and this is the Nile.
Uh-huh.
And straight across, this is what's promised to Abraham, the land of Canaan. Enter a land that I will show unto thee. I mean, if you're reading the King James Bible in Genesis, he's offered that. You're probably familiar with that, Zach.
Yeah.
Well, you too, Mike, in passing.
In passing.
Something you'll notice is those borders. Now, keep this image in your head real fast, because we're going to switch over to the current map. Oh, gosh, if I can figure this out. Sorry.
Having some technical difficulties over there.
Look, I didn't claim to be smart.
Critically,
There was no
acclaimed?
precursor for that.
So notice this. Now remember those borders, right?
Yeah.
So they go over to here and then over to the Nile. Have you noticed these pesky little countries in the way? I don't know if you've seen those.
Yeah.
They probably look familiar to you. So all these countries. So here is the Euphrates. You can see my mouse,
Yeah.
Yeah.
right? Euphrates right through here, and then the Nile. So you might recognize some of these countries: Iraq, Syria, Iran is somewhere in here.
See that big one to the right?
Yeah, it should be right there. Yeah, so you have a lot of these problem countries. And funny story, we've invaded these countries. So the ones that we've invaded that don't really fit into this promised land issue are Afghanistan and then we've been kind of toying with an idea of war with Iran, right? But we've definitely seen Israel engage with Lebanon, engage with Jordan, Egypt, and Israel are on good terms right now.
For now.
But Iran kind of stands up to this issue. So what we've done is we've kind of surrounded them. We've invaded Afghanistan and put pressure on them. So there's a bunch more bases. So there's kind of a funny joke in terms of people who study these things. They go, you know, if these people really didn't want to fight wars with the U.S., they wouldn't have put their country right there. So
that's I mean, you kind of put yourself in the situation at that point.
Yeah, you go and you build your country near our bases, thousands of years ahead of time.
Then your country.
Yeah, you're begging for a problem.
You should have known.
So coincidentally, all of these countries that we've decided to deliver freedom to happen to be enemies of Israel, or in the way of that greater Israel project. Now, a lot of people say, you know, well, Justin, they haven't expanded into those areas. Oh, really? Well, there's a UN convention, and I forget the exact terms, but you're basically not allowed to absorb land through war. So Israel is one of those countries that has actually gained territory through conflict. And what they say is, well, we're just occupying it because it's a rough area and everything like that. But you really don't they took over the Golan Heights, which is right on the border of Syria.
Right.
They control it, and they say, well, we need to control it because of terrorism. But there's no incidents out there. You know, there's no terrorism.
Yeah.
So wait, you can't go to war with a country, win the war, and then take over that country?
Well, so obviously we've seen from short answer, no. So obviously we've seen from 9/11, unless you're a complete clown, that the government is not above false flags, right? So creating an event, or at a bare minimum, allowing an event to happen and using that to justify war.
Right.
So for example, if Mexico were to start war with us, if we were to, you know, take out Mexico, we would then have to legally give it back.
Oh, yeah.
Really?
I think they outruled imperialism right after World War II or before World War II. It was like around that area. Like
around the time of the UN. Now, it was always frowned upon. The League of Nations was in talk about this, but the UN definitely outlawed that. And the UN's been around since, I believe, the 50s. Don't quote me on that. But definitely, you know, around the time of World War II is when the UN was created. Its predecessor, of course, being the League of Nations. Now, the solution to that is you just create a puppet government in its place. Or you just be Israel and the UN goes, hey, don't do that. That's illegal. And they go,
or you just
whatever,
Cold
bro.
War everything. And we're not invading, you know, these countries for no reason. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
We are going to war to help them reconstruct their government and give them.
We're helping.
Or even better, we're like, you know, we were just sitting over here and all of a sudden this organic uprising took place and we sent them a few weapons. And other than sending them weapons and money and intelligence and training, we really had nothing to do with it other than all those things.
Isn't that kind of how we got into World War I though? Wasn't it like an intercepted telegram of like the isn't that the Zimmerman telegram? Isn't that how we got into World War I?
I'm not 100% brushed up on that.
Okay.
I'd have to, you know, check some notes and everything like that.
What is that?
But
I believe that's what sprung us into World War I.
But what was the telegram?
Oh, I know what you're talking about. Yeah.
Yeah.
Trying to inspire Mexico to attack us. Yeah.
Yeah. And then that's what like gave us the excuse to just jump in World War I.
That was one of the things.
Yeah.
Germany was trying to inspire, and some people have doubted the authenticity of this. trying to inspire Mexico to attack us, which is kind of strange because if I were Mexico, I mean, I wouldn't fight us.
Yeah.
Probably not in your best interest.
Right. No,
No.
100% not.
We already took half your country from you.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
I mean, back when we had muskets.
What chance do you have? But yeah, that's Zionism, and the U.S. and Israel have been inextricably linked. The strange thing is you'll see people that will Noam Chomsky. He's a Jewish man who's anti-Zionist. So Zionism, of course, the belief that the Jews should have their own national homeland. But some to the extreme, there's people that say, you know, we're Jewish. God made us a promise. That whole land is ours. And everyone else there is just a bunch of squatters, basically. So yeah, if you've been there for thousands of years, that's fine. But I always look at it as if I get evicted from an apartment and then I come back 2,000 years later and I go, hey, my family got evicted from here. But actually it's ours. You got to leave.
Yeah.
Yeah. But Israel's been the only country that's been able to get away without even having to go through this charade of installing a puppet government where they just take land and they just take it and go, well, too bad, so sad. That's ours now.
How do they get away with that though?
So they have permanent members of the UN that there's permanent members like Russia and the US are two of them, for example. If they vote against a measure or veto a measure, the measure does not take place. So whenever they want to sanction, the UN wants to sanction Israel, they'll say, hey, Israel did this. We're going to sanction them. Nobody's going to trade with them, whatever. The US will step in and go, oh, blah, blah, blah. You can't do that to my friend. So Noam Chomsky will say, well, Israel exists to serve the US interest, but it's obviously the other way around. Because the U.S. has gained nothing from it, but death, bloodshed, and I mean, I guess you could say a few oil tycoons and like the drug dealers, like Purdue Pharma, the OxyContin manufacturer, have gained from it. But the U.S. has essentially gained nothing from any of these Middle Eastern conflicts, and Israel has gained everything from them.
So, in your opinion, what is their interest in it at all?
In that land?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, it's a prime piece of real estate. A lot of fresh water, but still on a coast. There's, probably they make a lot of money off tourism, but that's a prime piece of real estate. If you controlled that entire area under one government, I mean, countries like Saudi Arabia or any other oil producing countries wouldn't stand a chance. Nobody would stand a chance against you. You would completely run the world if you controlled a majority of Iraq, Syria, Lebanon. You had all that oil and you had a coast and you had, prime access to the Mediterranean. You could easily run the world.
So you'd basically be centralizing yourself, or not centralizing, but like you'd be in the middle of everything that matters to the world financially.
You got to think too. It's also, there's a lot of standoff too. The only way to really attack them would be by air or sea, because invading them would be too hard. Because in between where that cradle of civilization, in Iraq, where the first Mesopotamian civilizations were created, you have thousands of miles of standoff of desert and mountains and everything like that. And it's just not a place where if anybody wanted to take you out, anybody can do it. So if you controlled that entire area, you control the world. And the US and Israel don't control it, but they control whether or not it's peaceful. And they do that through the funding of terrorism. Okay. And that's why it's strange that ISIS is, which stands for Islamic State in Iraq and Syria, happens to have the same goals of borders as Israel. Even stranger then, if you ever raid any weapons depots for ISIS or Al-Qaeda or Al-Nusra Front, any of those terrorist organizations, you'll find one of three types of, four really. So one, we can discount immediately as a scam or not any sort of ulterior motives. They primarily have leftover Soviet weapons, AKs, Kalashnikovs, RPKs, all sorts of leftover Soviet weapons. You probably seen them in, Call of Duty and stuff like that.
Yeah, of course.
So nobody's supplying them with those actively. I mean, not as far as anyone can tell. All that stuff is old. That's leftover stuff from the Cold War, the Afghan conflict, everything like that. Iran-Iraq war. But whenever they raid their weapons depots, they find Saudi weapons, Israeli weapons, and U.S. weapons. And usually those U.S. weapons make their ways through Saudi Arabia, which so many people talk about how, Trump was like this hero and he was going to end war. But one of the first things he did in 2017 was when he was inaugurated was sign the largest weapons deal in history with the Saudi family, which is
really
the biggest funder of terrorism. I mean, a majority of the 19 hijackers came from Saudi Arabia.
Wow.
But
how did he even get clearance to do something like that?
Clear.
Well, if we're looking at it from one of our older videos standpoint, I think it's just the power of command, like the 7 families that run the world, and then the president's kind of like under that. So I mean, like they just
president's basically a puppet.
Oh yeah.
Well, one of his biggest funders, actually his largest donor, who just recently passed away, and I'm glad to see him gone. I have no problem saying that. Sheldon Adelson, a huge Zionist. And you can interpret his Zionism. I'm sure if you would talk to him, his Zionism, Israel deserves to exist. But I bet you among his friends that his real thought was Israel deserves to exist from the Nile to the Euphrates.
The original Israel.
Yeah, the original Israel, right. So Zionism is, again, it's a really difficult subject to confront. And when you start talking about when you start connecting the Jewish people to war and all sorts of horrible things, you start to get in a lot of trouble for yourself. Your career can get ruined. You
very
can get
fast.
Canceled. Yeah, depersoned, everything like that. So I really appreciate the Checked In podcast taking this coming down this terrifying road, walking down this path with me.
I mean, we're here for the reason why we're here for the truth. So if that gets us quote unquote canceled, then it's something we're gonna have to be willing to take. You could always start a new YouTube channel, but you can't stop the facts. Everyone's got to know this stuff. That's the thing. At the end of the day, everybody has to know this kind of stuff, and that's why we got you on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and then we got to make sure everybody's checked into the real. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
Yeah, and I appreciate what you guys are doing. It's definitely very brave. So yeah, let's get into it, right? So the Jews as a whole, the Jewish people, have been living as what's called a diaspora, right? So a diaspora for the past 2,000 years, since the year 70 AD, when the Romans kicked them out under Titus. A few of them remained behind, but they were kicked out, but they remained a cohesive ethnic people without a nation. Some people doubt that they're not even really the same people anymore, but I really don't want to explore that tangent yet. Actually, if you're interested in something like that, you could look up the Hebrew Israelites, which are a group of people that believe that the true Israelites, not Jews, because Judah is just one tribe of 12, well, 13 really.
Kind of.
Right. That believe that the Native Americans, Puerto Ricans, Hispanic people, and the American black man are the true Israelites. But regardless, they've remained a cohesive ethnic people without a nation, living within nations. So the unofficial founder of modern Zionism thought was Theodor Herzl in the late 1800s. But things really kick off during World War I. So February 1917, Britain, France, and Russia and their allies are, getting beat up pretty bad by the Austro-Hungarians, Germans, Ottomans, and all their allies, right? And then the U.S. is doing their typical thing. Hey, we're neutral. We are delivering weapons and supplies to one side, the British side, but not the other. But we're definitely neutral.
100%. I mean, we're just helping out the cause. That's really all it is. How are you neutral if you're only giving weapons to one side?
Right, exactly.
Literally, yeah.
How
The
indeed.
weapons go to the highest bidder.
Right, exactly.
So World War One starts, I believe, 1914 or 1915. Anyway, the Zionist Jews have completely backed the Allied powers into a corner. And in the early beginning of the war, a lot of these Zionists approach, and one of them is what do you call him? Lord Nathaniel Rothschild, or Lionel Rothschild, rather.
Sounds familiar.
Yeah, whose
Very
great
familiar.
grandfather was Amschel Herschel Rothschild, the founder of the Rothschild banking system. They've approached the parliament in Britain and said, hey, you should give us Palestine because you guys are going to win this war. You're going to beat the Ottoman Empire and all their allies. So why don't you just give us Palestine? It's our home. So there was a belief among some Christians that the Jews were the chosen people and that was their land and everything like that. But that really wasn't the mainstream view in modern Christianity until I forget what the study Bible is called came out. Let me look it up.
This is so.
While you're doing that, I can explain a little bit just from being a Christian. So yeah, they believe that because it's kind of funny because like in the book of Revelation, it gives like 7 clues to when Jesus is supposed to return, and one of them is Israel returning as a nation. But the way I look at it is that I feel like they're technically returned as a nation, but they don't have their boundaries back. So I don't think that, that aspect is like fully, because a lot of Christians believe that, or people that study the Bible that aren't Christians believe that those people, I don't know what to call them, the people that study like the end of the world theories from like all
Eschatologists.
Yeah. They look at that and they're like, some of them are like, yeah, this is a sign, and then other people are like, no, they don't have the full Israel back, so it's not a sign. So I mean, like, just to kind of throw some background information in there. Like,
That's an excellent point. I actually watched the debate between who are the true Jews or Israelites, as the Hebrew Israelites said. It was between a higher up in the Hebrew Israelite school, the ones we just referenced.
Yeah.
And he was debating a Sephardic Jew who lives in Israel, a rabbi.
Uh-huh.
He said, how can this be God's doing if you didn't even get the full land back?
Yeah.
You took part of it. And if it's God's doing, how do you compromise on that? Right.
Right.
Yeah. It seems silly, but the Schofield Reference Bible comes out in the middle of the past century, right around the time Israel comes to fruition in 48.
Yeah.
And that's when people start realizing in general, or believing that in general. But a lot of people in government believed it. Woodrow Wilson, the president who got us into World War I, believed it. And then a few members of the British Parliament. But they approach maybe they did, maybe they just found it politically expedient because of the power of the Jewish people in our society through their control of or their overrepresentation, despite being 2% of the population, make up a majority of media, banking, and government positions. They have a lot of power.
Which that never made sense to me because that's absolute fact. I don't understand how you can make up 2% of the population.
Yeah, and in fact, in our current Congress, Jewish people are overrepresented by a factor of 30. So actually, whites are probably one of the most underrepresented in proportion to their population,
Right.
not in terms of absolute numbers in Congress or anything like that.
Right.
But they're underrepresented, despite making up about 60% of the U.S. population. Only, probably they less than half of Congress is white. If you exclude Jews from the category of being white, which most Jews themselves would say, I am not white, I am Jewish.
Right.
If pressed, depending on the day, but that's another subject. So the issue here is they approach a few members of British Parliament and say, hey, we should get Palestine. And they're like, okay, well, we'll think about, helping you out. They had no motivation.
Right.
So other than, I'm your friend, I'm a Rothschild, we go way back. What do you say, bro? Give me that land. Sure. Nobody checked with the Arabs, but whatever.
They don't need to worry about this.
They're a bunch of complainers anyway. They're like, stop killing my kids. Shut up. Jeez.
Hey, another thing too about the Arabs in that area, from, like I said, from a biblical standpoint, a lot of Christians believe that the other inhabitants of that area are members of the tribe that the Israelites or the Canaanites were supposed to slaughter on their voyage back with Joshua the prophet.
Yeah.
And they believe that they're the remaining people, and in the Bible they said that they would that remaining tribe will be the burden of the land, because you didn't listen to what God said and try to slay them, kill them all, man, male, woman, child, whatever, infant. And they were supposed to completely obliterate them, and they didn't. And then that's the whole thing, where it's like it's always going to be a challenge for the Canaanites or the Hebrews or whatever you want to call them in the Bible, that's supposedly a curse from that time all the way till now. And that's why Israel has all these conflicts, is because they initially didn't take care of it. So now they're
genocide these people.
Yeah, pretty much.
Wait, so that's in the Bible?
That's in the Old Testament, that the burden of the land is the name of the curse. You can just look at burden of the land, Israel, Old Testament, Bible. Just Google that phrase and you'll see like everything. Yeah.
I hate to say this because I know that you are Christian, Zach, and I hope I'm not coming off as deliberately inflammatory. But at the bare minimum, the Old Testament, if not the whole book, is definitely a book of a Jewish supremacy versus, say, a nationalism, which would be I deserve a right to exist and so do you. But it's more of a book of supremacy in the sense that your race will either be killed or enslaved by the Israelites. Those who are the members of Amalek, Edom, which they believe a lot of the Persians, the Iranian, Syrian types, or the Ishmaelites, who are cousins like the Arabs, or the Philistines or Palestinians, as they believe is the root word. And that's what they say. But they're asking the Brits to give them Palestine, and the Brits at that point have no motivation other than doing a favor for a friend. Right. The Rothschilds held, and I don't know exactly what their district was, like we have congressional districts, but Lionel Rothschild's position had been held by one Rothschild before him, and then a Rothschild before that, while at the same time working in the Rothschild banking system. And then his position was thereafter taken by another Rothschild, and then finally they went fully into their banking positions and preferred to operate behind the scenes rather than out front in political power. Which
has worked very well for them, I feel like.
For Zionists, yeah, and again, not all Jewish people are Zionists or believe that they should behave like this, but a lot of them are, unfortunately.
What's a Zionist?
Zionists, the ones that believe, well, see, there's
Because
at
my
this
impression
point-
of a Zionist was literally just a person who was Jewish.
not all, but some. So at this point in history, so the definition changes with time, which makes it so interesting. In 1915, roughly around that time frame, Zionism meant many things to different Jewish people. It meant we should live in the promised land, the entire promised land. It meant to some, we should just take parts of Palestine. It meant to some, hey, we should just get a country wherever it may be, you know, let's not cause too many problems. Now, those people were in the minority, unfortunately, or at least were more silent. Hey, we should get a, you know, let's take a section in an African jungle or Madagascar, you know, just get away from everybody and have our own place to finally be.
Right.
And I can understand that. I could even understand them living in Palestine, but you need to cooperate with the people that are there. You don't just go to some people that are going to occupy the territory like the Brits, or at least intended to after World War I. So they have at this point, the Brits have no real motivation to move forward other than, again, just friendship. So at this point, Bolshevism is taking over, or communism, right? Revolutionary communism is gaining traction in Russia. And Russia is one of their biggest sections of power in World War I. And the reason Europe didn't fall right away, because Russia has so much manpower. And like we had talked before, it has this huge advantage called the Russian winter, where nobody can really take Russia. Nobody has successfully invaded Russia.
Nobody's used to that winter but the Russians.
No, well, no, I mean, and Hitler tries, but we'll talk about that later. But yeah, so they're barely holding their own already against Germany and Austria-Hungary and the Ottomans. But then in 1917, Russia is overthrown. The czars are overthrown by Bolsheviks. The original Soviet government is formed, and it's a little bit less than 400. I believe it's like 360 members. And over 3/4 of them, despite making up 2% of the population, are Jewish.
Really?
So, yes. So communism is absolutely the most disgusting ideology I've ever encountered. And by disgusting, I mean that the results of it are just terrible. So the two major leaders of the revolution are Vladimir Lenin, the half Jewish man, and Leon Trotsky, who changed his name from Leonard Bronstein. So similar to like Jack Ruby, whose name is Jack Rubenstein, they adopt these names that sound more like, and frankly, unless you know what you're looking for, a lot of Jewish people, Ashkenazi specifically, look white.
Right. So
unless they have a name, you know, that is traditionally Jewish, Rothschild or Cohen or something like that, it's hard to tell them apart from a John Smith or a Jeff Jones or anything like that. It's hard to tell. So Leon Trotsky changed his name from Leonard Bronstein. He was a tailor in New York. So this is a really great move, in my opinion, on their part. So Bolsheviks take over Russia and then sign a pact with Germany and essentially their allies not to fight. So they basically pull out of the war in 1917 at the most inopportune moment. So at this point, the Brits are like, all right, well, the only way to get this war done is to get the U.S. involved. That's their only hope.
Right.
They need more manpower. So they know the Rothschild and other Zionists. I think there's Weizmann was one of. I'm not sure. Anyway, they revisit this idea with the Brits. They say, hey, why don't you give us Palestine? You know you're going to win the war. And they're like, we're not winning the war. And they're like, well, we can get the U.S. into the war. We have a lot of influence in the media in the U.S. We just need to get the people behind it so that the politicians are behind it. And the politicians are going to be behind anything that'll get them reelected.
Right, naturally.
So the war propaganda machine starts working. The Germans are, killing children, and the Germans are for bad things, and we're for good things, and you're against bad things. Therefore, we should do this.
We need to jump in, help out.
We need it. Bad things are happening, and we're good people, so we need to stop the bad things. Wouldn't you agree?
Okay.
Yeah. So they say we'll get the U.S. into the war, but you need to give us Palestine. So right after the Russian Revolution in February of 1917, April 1917, 2 months later, the U.S. joins the war.
Oh, you don't say.
Yeah, and that's why a lot of people doubt the authenticity of the Zimmerman note that Zach was referring to.
Yeah.
And the Lusitania, obviously got sunk.
Yeah.
That was a big passenger ship that was a hit with a lot of civilians on board that died. It was a cruise ship essentially. Anyway,
familiar. Sounds like ESS Trade Center.
Yeah, basically, right? Yeah, the SS Trade Center. So they took away the Russian ally. They hold the key to getting the Americans into the war, and then the Balfour Declaration is signed, but it's not revealed until November of 1917. The war is over by 1918, or maybe 19. Anyway, shortly thereafter, the war is won.
Mm-hmm.
So we already said that Lionel's position was held by two other family members, succeeded by another Rothschild. And here's the funny thing is the person that succeeds Lionel Rothschild is Lionel Nathan de Rothschild, who is anti-Zionist, but once he's the head of a British organization of anti-Zionist Jews. But it's like it's not even really anti-Zionism, because he was in favor of Jews settling Palestine. It was just basically a debate on words, just semantics. He said Jews should still be able to settle Palestine, but maintain their British citizenship. We need to stop acting like Jews can't be British and be Israeli at the same time. Well, Israel doesn't exist, but they want to have their cake and eat it too. Did Zach fall out of here?
No, it's just I'll be right back.
All right, no problem. So he's anti-Zionist in name only, which is a little bit silly. It's just a semantic thing. So, yeah, nobody asked the Arabs what they think about this.
So they're just making all these decisions and talking about all this and doing all of this without even considering the Arabs.
No, absolutely not. Those are, and by the Arabs, you mean the Ishmaelites, right? They should have died thousands of years ago when they were inconsiderate enough to still exist.
How dare them?
Right.
Yeah, right.
So between the Bolshevik uprising, now on the articles that you may read and find about the Treaty of Versailles, you'll see you're inevitably going to come across this thing called the stab in the back myth.
Mm-hmm.
So Hitler obviously gains power in the 1920s.
Yeah.
Shortly thereafter in Germany, because Germany is subject to this thing called the Treaty of Versailles, and they assume the guilt of the entire war. And in today's dollars, they're given with a population of 40 million. So keep in mind, the U.S. has a population of 340 million people.
Wow.
A population of 40, and I'm being extremely generous, a population of 40 million people. Most people think it was more like 25 or 30. Is given a $500 billion debt in today's dollars that they need to pay in reparations. Yes.
Bro.
So a reserve bank is installed there, and the reserve bank is like, all right, well, there's an easy way to pay this debt. We'll just make more money.
Oh, naturally, yeah. That's the only thing that makes sense. Just make more money and got more money.
Right. So for I know a lot of Zoomers are going to be listening. Do they collect Pokemon cards? I don't know. Right? What do they collect?
I think Pokemon's a thing now.
Yeah. The cards.
Let
are
me
going
show you my
crazy.
Pokemans.
There's like
How about this?
$1 million Pokemon cards now.
Let's say this. I have a limited edition set of Little Nas X Nikes.
Okay. I'm
And
bringing
I
pop
have-
culture all the way into this.
Yeah, I
like
think
it.
there's what 666 pairs, right?
Yeah.
We don't
something
need to
like
go down
Makes
that
sense.
rabbit hole. We don't need to go down that rabbit hole. Anyway, there's like 666 pairs, right? And you get one. So obviously your pair is worth $1,000. Let's just say it's worth $1,000.
Uh-huh.
I don't know what it's actually worth. I don't get out much.
I think you might be actually low on that. But anyway.
I don't listen to hippity hoppity country music that often. But anyway, you've got a pair of sneakers that's worth $1,000 and there's only 600 some odd pairs of them.
Yeah.
And you're glad that they're so rare. But then that little Nas X goes, all right, it's time to release the second edition. Just kidding. I actually made 10 million pairs of these.
Yeah.
Your pair is gone down in value
Substantially.
because everybody else has them.
Right.
So this is essentially what happened to the German mark. It was said that you would need a wheelbarrow to carry the cash to buy a loaf of bread. And by the time they said that some prices at some point at the high point of inflation, prices would double within 6 hours.
Really?
Bro.
So a loaf of bread would double in price.
Within 6 hours.
Yeah. So obviously Hitler is like, all right, well, I'm going to take power. Going to need to blame somebody for this stuff. He says, well, between the Bolshevik uprising and the withdrawal of Russia from the war and other things like that, between the various attempted Bolshevik socialist and communist uprisings, which there was a socialist government in Bavaria, a part of Germany that took over for a little bit of time. Pardon me. Sorry. Anyway, there was a socialist uprising that took part in that, which of course was organized by a lot of people of the Jewish persuasion.
Right.
Hitler has a lot of ammo. A bunch of Woodrow Wilson's cabinet is made up of Zionists that are Jewish. And obviously they have a lot of influence. I just went over a 4-generation member of parliament in Britain.
Right.
So Hitler's pointing out all this stuff, and that's just in the financial section. He's also pointing out that a lot of Jewish people are in power in the media in Germany. He's pointing out that all these people that help to organize and the people. So obviously most politicians don't think of things on their own. They have staff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They have staff. They have donors. I mean, this is common knowledge. And a lot of those people happen to be Zionist Jews.
Right.
So Hitler starts pointing that out. And then he also points out a lot of degeneracy that's going on in the Weimar Republic, which is basically a majority of the time in between Nazi Germany comes to power and in between World War I is this Weimar Republic in Germany. So Hitler is pointing out all these things and he says, hey, do you know that people come to Berlin and you can get any sort of sexual fantasy that you want in Berlin? It was said that if you were into having sex with children, you could get that in Berlin because
Really?
these people were so poor. And this is one of the things that I really abhor about our situation in America is we're not exactly at that point, but you are seeing a lot of women, unfortunately, and some men, go on OnlyFans, right?
Yeah, that's a common thing now. That's a completely socially acceptable thing now.
Right, and people are selling their bodies and selling their dignity, and
For $5 a month.
For $5 a month. Really, it's really unfortunate to see that happen.
Yeah,
And this is something that's common in areas with struggling economies and struggling inflation. And we're about to reach Weimar levels of inflation. What was it, Mike? How much the U.S. dollar was created in the past year since COVID?
40% of the existing money in the U.S. was created over the past, I believe it was 6 months.
40%. So it's only going to get worse.
Though.
And this is something I tell a lot of people is, you can push for all this stuff, but out of chaos, order will return.
And it's definitely going to, in whatever way it finds itself.
Yeah, and if you're intimidated by the idea of a Hitler, I mean, stop giving whoever that Hitler is ammo.
Right.
So Hitler is pointing out all these degeneracies that are occurring because, and I don't blame women for doing what they're doing, or the children, or anybody that's selling their body, in whether it be in Weimar Republic or in the U.S.
Right.
Republic. I don't blame them for this. I do blame the system that is put in place.
Right.
But Hitler merely pointed out that a lot of Jewish people were part of this. Obviously, a lot of Germans had to partake in this too.
Yeah.
But it was said that in Berlin, if you had money, you didn't need to have much. You could go there. You could have sex with a child. You could have sex with an animal. There were reports that there was some sort of weird fetish, and I can't think of the name of it, where you could have sex with an animal, cook that animal, and then eat it.
What?
All sorts of degeneracies.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Yeah. And then I'm going to share this screen.
I don't know if you want to share that screen. Hold on. What are you going to show us right now?
I should point out this. Obviously, we have a lot of transgenderisms stuff going on.
Right.
And you can, think of what you want of it. This is one of the most famous pictures of a book burning.
Okay. What book are they burning?
What they're burning here is the Magnus Hirschfeld's library. Okay. Magnus Hirschfeld was a homosexual Jew in Weimar Republic who was banned, or he was essentially banished.
Now, hold on. Was homosexuality acceptable? I thought homosexuality was only acceptable over the past 15, 20 years, and that's putting it lightly acceptable.
No, one of the obviously it was very popular in Rome and stuff like that, and you can't really blame Jewish people for that or anything like that.
Okay.
And I'm not blaming Jewish people for this. I'm merely saying that they had a big hand in this.
Yeah.
Magnus Hirschfeld was a gay Jew, and this is all his writing. One of the things that he wrote about was, and he's just one of many, was that he estimated there were at a minimum 64 genders.
What?
Yes, yeah. And this was the type of stuff that he was pushing in Berlin. And maybe you believe that, maybe you don't. But
you come up with 64 genders.
Right. I have my feelings on the matter. But I think that if you're essentially trying to culturally imperialize these people with a culture that is not theirs. The Germanic people, the same tribes that conquered, Rome,
right.
This masculine energy, they don't have a culture that has room for 64 genders. They just don't.
Right. That's not in their culture whatsoever.
Right. One of the first transgender surgeries was performed with a lot of research done by Magnus Hirschfeld's Institute of, I think, Sexual Research. He estimated that a majority of the population was homosexual, or even very close to 100%. So they don't tell you this when they say, well, Hitler was burning books. This is the first place. The second he became dictator, and I forget his name, the president of Germany gave over emergency powers. This is they immediately ran down the street and burned this place down.
First thing they did, basically.
First thing they did. So Zionism really gave Hitler all sorts of ammo for this kind of stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. And I actually saw a quote. I forgot who said it. But historically, isn't the beginning of the fall of a civilization when genders are like, there's more genders, more homosexuality. Isn't that, like, historically speaking, the beginning of the end essentially for civilizations historically? Because I know in Greece that was the thing. That was like
Greece,
the beginning of it.
said.
Yeah, what was that, Zach?
I said in Greece that was the downfall because there weren't enough, I guess, masculine men to go to war in a sense. Because I know a lot of the Spartans practiced homosexuality to create more like a love bond to protect their fellow Spartan. But I think when it came down to like Athens and stuff, they were, I guess, too free-minded and couldn't unite everybody under certain ideology to advance their country. So I think that's why, to the point of what Mike is saying, that's like part of the downfall is when there's too many ideologies being introduced to one area, it just kind of separates everybody and like divides them and makes it harder for countries to come together and bounce back. So I think that's why, yeah.
I will say this, because I don't want to appear to condone, taking people that are of different sexual persuasions and putting them into camps or anything like that. I don't want to condone that.
Yeah.
But I will say this, people exist that want to take what's yours, and they will always exist. And if you're not able to defend yourself, you're going to find yourself taken over you're going to be subjugated. And I will say pornography was one of the number one things that the National Socialist Party burned. And pornography is not allowed on public television in Israel, but is broadcast on the Israeli-controlled public television for anyone to see, children included, on the Palestinian TV.
So they know what they're doing. They're introducing it to Palestine, yet their own people can't partake in this.
Right. So moral relativism, meaning, believing that anything is moral, as long as you can justify it, I guess somewhat. I'll say logically, justify it somewhat is permissible. It's pornography and sexual flexibility, we'll say, just to be politically correct, is a weapon. It's a weapon.
Mm-hmm.
If I want to weaken a society, I'll weaken it at that and get them to question everything,
right?
From the simplest things. What is a male? What is a female? But just a merely a social construct. And I guess you could say it is a social construct, but the social construct that you're introducing to replace it, something that is stable, something right. that holds power. And I'd have to say unequivocally, the answer is no, just judging off the suicide rates of gay, lesbian, and transgender people. And people can blame that on any sort of supremacy or patriarchy, but there's very little variation between, say, European countries that have allowed it since the 1800s in terms of suicide rates versus their counterparts in the US, where gay marriage has only been allowed since 2009, 2010.
So real quick to touch on that. What exactly is, can you go deeper into that? So you're telling me that the people that either go through the transition of male to female, female to male, gay people, they commit suicide at a higher rate than those that don't?
Yeah, gays and lesbians aren't as on the absolute highest end. They are definitely above the average of the population.
Uh-huh.
Okay. And transgenders are just astronomically above.
And what do you think is the reason for that?
Just there's no, like I said, so I do believe in the sense that gender is a social construct.
Right.
So I wear what is men's clothing, but I guess in an alternative, timeline, I guess if we can talk about, different dimensions, right? Say I exist in a different dimension where I have green skin or something like that, right?
Right.
Perhaps being a male means wearing a thong or something like that. But the issue is my social construct as a male is something that's more or less stable versus the new social construct of a transgender male is something that commits suicide at a rate of instead of 200 per 100,000, something 5, 10, 20 times that. About 50% of transgenders will commit suicide, will die by suicide. Yeah. A huge number of them end up in sex work because it's a social construct that's introduced that is not stable. It has no stability. It's not something that is frankly meant to survive, in my opinion. I think it's nefarious in nature.
Absolutely. Create. What do you think about this idea being introduced into public schools? Because I know that's very much a thing now.
Yeah, for sure. And media and like a lot of shows are being more open to like
sexuality, all that.
Yeah.
I don't want to condemn someone for their identity. I'll say that. I will say this though. I think it is a weapon. I think it is meant to humiliate and demoralize and weaken a society. And you can call that, perhaps, I believe in a masculine patriarchy, but society got along just fine without this concept. And perhaps people did have urges of, feeling that they were in the wrong body or something like that.
Right.
But I mean, I guess I could equate that to, I felt, I was undersized for many years of my life. And I felt like I was in, a body I didn't want to be in. But you have to go along to get along rather than doing these hormone replacements and doing things that can't be undone.
Right.
This is a tattoo. Decisions. Yeah. This is a tattoo that can't be lasered off.
Right.
Once your genitalia is modified, it's
forever.
It's permanent. Yeah.
It's permanent. Can it be undone to a degree?
Yeah, I was gonna say there's no way that surgery can happen and then it's just gonna go back to normal. The amount of money that's going into that, like that you'd have to shell out of pocket. I'm assuming because I know that insurance does cover the initial transition, but does it cover the transition back? I don't know.
No, I doubt that. I doubt that it'd be reversed. Like they'd cover the reversal. I mean, if there is a reversal surgery, I don't know.
I'm sure it exists. Anything exists.
It would. You'd have to have the right legal team. You'd have to have the right amount of money. And unfortunately, with the prevalence of mental disorders among transgenders and homosexuals, well, specifically transgenders, it's hard to say that they would be in a position where they would have a really good job or steady gainful employment, or how they rank healthcare plans since the unveiling of Obamacare. Right. The Affordable Care Act is they rank them as, gold, platinum, silver, bronze, or whatever the classifications may be. It's hard to imagine that a transgender individual would have a high level healthcare plan that would cover things like that.
Yeah. Exactly.
Or if healthcare even does pay for a detransition. But there's certain things that can't be undone, hormone replacement or hormone therapy for children while your body's developing. That's going to affect your bone density. You're changed forever.
Right.
And with the prevalence of mood disorders, I'd have to say, if you're thinking about doing that, just think a little bit longer about it.
Yeah,
I would urge that. It's because maybe it will make you happier, and by all means, I hope it does.
Statistically speaking, though,
I don't want to see anybody kill themselves. That's the last thing I want to do, because that's definitely irreversible. But unfortunately, a lot of Jewish people were mixed up in this business, and a lot of people don't know that the Weimar Republic was like this. where you could get prostitutes that were mother-daughter pairs or anything like that. And these people were definitely being taken advantage of and humiliated by the Treaty of Versailles and occupied by France when they stopped making their payments. And inflation was one of the worst, other than Zimbabwe, one of the worst incidents of hyperinflation ever. And I would say that the U.S. is probably headed towards that, and you're starting to see that with the unveiling of OnlyFans, which has come under controversy for having children who are faking IDs, and minors are going on there too. But Hitler, all he had to do was point it out and say, "Oh, there's another Jewish person involved. There's another Jewish person involved," and just simply do some basic arithmetic. Less than 2% of the population is involved in a bunch of these things, and what are you gonna say? I mean, he had a point,
right?
Yeah.
Does that mean lock a bunch of people into camps?
No,
I don't think so. But he had a point.
I think there's also a parallel there with kind of like now, like in America, like there's kind of like this like elephant in the room about Middle Eastern citizens, like, when they come over here in refuge, it's like, oh, there's like an uneasiness to some people, and they don't really understand, like, there's a lot of different groups that are doing one thing, and there's a whole bunch of nations that are suffering from a small amount of groups that are just kind of like taking over. So I can kind of see like that same parallel or sense of like, I don't know if it's like propaganda or like misinterpreted propaganda, I should say, where it's like we're at war in a region, but that whole region is now looked at as an enemy, even though the people that have nothing to do with the conflict, they're just literally, they just live there. They come here for refuge. And I feel like that's kind of like another kind of where history repeats itself, where it's like, okay, well, there's a country looking at a group of people that are looking at a whole nation behind it, or a whole area of people behind it.
Right.
And it's like, I guess, it's just like history repeated itself there. Now, like now we kind of see it there. So I can kind of see how, that could have been a tactic for Hitler to use and like kind of blame a small group for, and then make a whole, nation of people pay for something that could have been, you know what I mean? Like that could have been not really just, I feel like he couldn't have attacked those people specifically. So he attacked like the nation. And then that's when, well, the nation living amongst in the European region. But yeah.
I see what you mean. Not every single Jewish person was trying to cause problems. And there's actually, it's interesting that you would mention that, Zach. So there's World Zionist conferences, and then there's Zionist conferences and Jewish advocacy groups. And I don't say, hey, that's bad to have those. But there were World Zionists headquartered in America, and there were Zionists that were or Jewish advocacy groups that existed in Germany. And these people were living in Germany, these Jewish people, and they were telling the World Zionists in America, they're saying, hey, you guys are advocating boycotts against the Germans, and the Germans are mad. And you're organizing these boycotts of goods and using your influence. And they're very resourceful people, so they've gained positions of power in America. And they've created these boycotts against Nazi Germany. And the Jews in Germany are saying, listen, we're not exactly living in, Disney World here, but nobody is seeking us out in mass numbers and deporting us to camps at this point.
Right.
Although that idea hadn't been heard of. They're saying, hey, stop organizing these boycotts, stop agitating them against the whole Jewish people. Let the Germans take out their rage on those who are causing, or those whom they represent and see as foreign, and let us live our lives. Stop using politics and making us, political pawns to be sacrificed on the altar of Zionism. We just want to go along to get along. We have shops here. Whenever you create boycotts, they create boycotts against us. Whenever you threaten violence, they threaten violence against us. So you're putting us in the middle of this fight, and we don't want to be in this fight. We just want to go along to get along.
Right.
And a lot of Jewish people were caught in the crossfire. And it's interesting that you mentioned that, Zach, about, refugees that are caught in the crossfire by these conflicts. And it's just terrible, people that are willing to sacrifice their own, Zionists that are willing to sacrifice their own.
Yeah.
And they base this on beliefs that it's immoral and it's sinful and against Judaism to mingle in non-Jewish society and try to fully participate in the word assimilate, saying you shouldn't be assimilating. You should be with us. You should be with the boycotts. And like, well, I have a family to feed.
Right.
I don't have time for your politics. I'm living real life. Your politics are affecting my life. And that's why people are, breaking in and forcing me to wear a star and breaking my shop and busting it up and calling me all sorts of names and beating me up and cutting off my braids and treating me like trash because you're agitating them.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
And it's just terrible. People get caught in the crossfire. So, but that kind of brings me to my next point. There actually was a considerable amount of cooperation between the Zionists and Hitler. And it actually manifests itself. Let me just share this really quick. It manifests itself when Hitler in the early 1920s starts sending massive amounts of Jews with their wealth intact. So that he said, listen, I believe in my opinion that you stole this wealth from the German people. And maybe some did, through the use of usury, charging of interest and stuff like that.
Mm.
But I'm sure a lot of them, again, were just living their lives in Germany and just happened to be there and had nothing to do with what the Magnus Hirschfields and the Rothschilds were doing. And you can see right here, this is a coin that commemorates the cooperation between the Third Reich and the Zionists in moving massive amounts of Jewish people to Palestine, their ancestral homeland. So you can see this, right?
Mm-hmm. They got the star on the one side and the
yeah.
swastika on the other. Wow.
And it's crazy. And nobody really mentions this transfer agreement here,
Right.
the Havara transfer agreement between the Zionists and the Third Reich. So this is still, 1920s to the 30s. This is still about 6 years before Poland is invaded and annexed. So, yeah, a lot of cooperation, and politics really makes odd bedfellows. So it's not like Hitler was unreasonable the whole time. So let's not operate that he was a crazy man the whole time. You can call him a crazy man, sure, but not 100% of the time.
Right.
So there's no real mass murder campaigns in Germany until these boycotts are pushed by American Zionists. And you can see that case in point with that coin.
Right.
So this is just getting to touch into World War II. And I kind of want to leave that for next time because I think we've already covered a lot between, the Bolshevists in Russia. We haven't even touched upon the Jewish communists that helped put Mao into power in China. We've talked about the Balfour Agreement, and I think we've given the people a lot to think about, right? A lot
Absolutely.
of bananas to think about.
Absolutely, I agree.
I kind of give away the code there, huh?
Yeah. All right, guys. So I just want to say thank you for tuning in today on this episode of Checked In. Make sure you like, comment, subscribe. Our Instagram is right there at Checked In Podcast. Also, our TikTok handle as well. Make sure you like and plus on TikTok. Definitely comment. Let us know what your thoughts, opinions are in the comment section. Don't forget to turn the notification bells on. Stay tuned in every time we post. And you've officially been checked in. And thank you for watching again.